Welcome, everyone. Thank you for NCLD to host a lively discussion, hopefully, on AI. Artificial intelligence, if you don't know what AI means, it's been all over the news lately. My colleagues and I have done some research on this area. We've been working on it for years, and we're going to talk a little bit about it, but we're hoping also to get into some community conversation around it. I think it's important that this topic has come up at this event, and especially with NCLD, because I think there's a huge benefit for individuals with learning disabilities to be able to be supported by artificial intelligence. I'm an adult with a learning disability, and I just told Jackie this the other day. We're on the phone talking about this event, and she goes, "I never knew that about you." And I said, well, it wasn't until recent that I was able to kind of really share that, because in academia, we don't often talk about it, right? And in fact, it wasn't until I became a full professor that I actually felt comfortable sharing that in a department of special education. But I think it's critical to bring us together and celebrate the diversity of the learning process and what it means to all individuals. And I think what AI is going to do, and we're going to talk about it in just a minute, is going to bring forth great benefits to all of the students within the learning process. That being said, there's obviously going to be some challenges to overcome in doing this work. So I was asked to first start out by talking about what artificial intelligence is, and because what most people think it is ChatGPT, right? I don't know if anyone's heard of ChatGPT. If you've opened a paper since November or looked at any news, it's probably been part of the news. But essentially, artificial intelligence as a term has been around for about 50 years. And people have been researching it in labs and actually in the field, which I can talk about in just a minute, for just about that length of time. And it's really been over the last decade and a half that we're really starting to see great strides within artificial intelligence to where it's become kind of the darling of the media, if you will. But artificial intelligence, there's not really a global definition for it, but generally it's when a machine mimics human intelligence, generally associated with completing tasks or augmenting human behavior, or in somewhat controversial fashion, taking over for the human. But it's generally anytime a machine mimics human intelligence. That's what artificial intelligence is. It's a pretty broad definition. And it's much broader than the large language models that are out there, such as ChatGPT. In fact, artificial intelligence, probably everyone's used it today, and they may have not even recognized that they were using it. If you opened your phone by looking at it today, or used a fingerprint to open your phone, you've used artificial intelligence today. In fact, many of you have been using artificial intelligence in various ways for over a decade in various things, from search to shopping to any number of things. Artificial intelligence comes in various forms, from very narrow artificial intelligence, which are these small little agents that are trained on your face maybe, to larger forms and where we can do things like what ChatGPT is doing or any of the large language models are doing today. And as we get further into this discussion, I'm sure it will come up, because Trey and I have done this before. But when we talk about artificial general intelligence, which is something that society is kind of excited about, but also a little scared of, and it's when an artificial intelligence is able to at least perform at the level of a human, if not overperform better than a level of a human in multiple domains at one time. And so the example I have given in these talks before is, imagine if how many people have used and gone on to ChatGPT to just play with it? There we go, most of the room. So imagine you did a search. Maybe you were looking for a great cocktail on ChatGPT, and you gave the search and you went through it and you found a great cocktail and you made it. But now what if a couple minutes later your phone binged and it says, "Hey, I may have come up with a better cocktail for you." So imagine an AI that's not only constantly going through the process and helping you complete your tasks, but also continually thinking about how to improve what it's provided you. And I think that's where we're heading in the near future. But again, artificial intelligence has been around for a long time. And in fact, we've been using it in classrooms for a long time in many of our data systems and the agents that we're using to support students. One of my early research projects that was published about 10 years ago was looking at a personalized learning environment for all students, including students with learning disabilities, where we developed a personalized environment that was competency-based and had various forms of data coming in at any given time. It also used the framework of universal design for learning, which I'd be glad to talk to people about after the discussion today. We used that as a basis, and what we found was that a majority of the students, including the students with learning disabilities, not only perform at where they should be performing, but actually gained, some of the students, in fact 70% of the students gained about a year and a half growth in a 1-year period. And that's a personalized environment. And these are things that we're going to begin seeing and talking about more and more within the education system, because it can truly transform the way we educate all humans, but again, it's going to cause some disruption. I want to have my colleagues here introduce themselves, talk to us about why you're here and what you've been thinking about with AI.
So I guess I'll start first because we're going down the line, looks like. So Trey Vasquez, University of Central Florida, as stated before. The areas in which I'm really interested in AI is not only policy development, but supporting traditionally marginalized populations. We have a large swath of the United States, which are rural, urban, suburban, and the needs and differences across those different organizations are great. And so looking at resource allocation, identifying best practices, evidence-based practices to support youth, teachers, parents. This whole thing about confusion with AI and people not realizing sometimes that you're in a social experiment, right? These companies are giving out this technology and it's for free, but it's not really for free because you are the product. They're learning, they're increasing their knowledge, their databases that help develop these large language models and large databases. And so you're only as good as how good your data are. And so it's interesting to see the reaction on a national stage. Some universities, some schools outright banned large language models. Some institutions embraced it, and everything in between. And what we like to say in our area of research is policy tends to be reactive and not proactive. And so trying to figure out now, how do we become proactive as a nation with some of the movement of AI in education? How do we support teachers and parents and youth to not only leverage the power of some of these models, but also how do we make sure that we put in guardrails so that we protect the environment and the students that we're working with?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ericka Rovira, professor at West Point, and I'm certain a lot of you are thinking, well, what do I have to add to this conversation? So I'm a roboticist trained as an applied experimental psychologist, and my research investigates how individual differences in executive attention or working memory, how that impacts trust in human autonomous teams. And specifically, I look at that from a high-risk environment, complex environment for soldiers. How do we put an embodied robot with dismounted soldiers in the field, and how do they develop trust in this robot? And really, we're concerned with over-reliance on these autonomous agents, on these autonomous robots. And so the parallel, or the piece I want to share with you today, is over-reliance in AI agents, and specifically how that relates to learning in the classroom. The other point I'd hope to chat with you a little bit about today is design equity. So I think we can all agree that technology is not value-free, so we need to understand these AI tools and think about whose voices are amplified and who these designs cause harm to. So those are the things I'd like to share with you today.
So let's kind of get started with the conversation. I mean, this is supposed to be a fireside chat. Imagine a nice fireplace behind us, maybe a little cognac, you know, I mean, or tea if you're that type. So as we think about AI, and you've both been thinking about, how might it transform the K-12 system and or the higher education system? What are things that we need to be thinking about and the leaders in the room need to be thinking about? And if you can throw in how it's going to directly impact students with learning disabilities, would be great.
I'll let you.
Sure. So I think about this in terms of three big buckets in terms of how AI tools can support the learners. And so one of them is a personalized learning experience. So you can think about intelligent tutoring. Those types of systems have been around for quite a while. However, I think the key use of AI in special ed is the ability to detect patterns in large amounts of data. And so specifically, as it relates to reading, I think the detection of patterns in students, how well they read, how well they're spelling, it can provide support in terms of pace of instruction or additional practice. The other big bucket that I sort of think about when I think about AI tools in the classroom is supporting learners that may have difficulty with communication or social skills. So in that sense, there's some research being done with robots that help students have extra practice with attention, eye movements, things of that nature, so that they are able to pick up on these different social cues. I think, yeah.
So I would say that there's some great promise and exciting research being done on the teacher performance side. So think about a teacher dashboard. We have all this incoming data and a room full of 20 or 30 students and a demanding situation, sometimes with multiple things going on. Well, now we have the ability to have a teacher dashboard, which may be allowing the teacher to get to a student just on time if there's some difficulty with attention, if there's executive function issues. Those are the really exciting pieces that are coming down the line. The other pieces that I think are exciting is that I want people to explore and play. Like some of you raised your hand with ChatGPT. That's one of many different AIs out there. If you like photography, if you like art, if you like math, Wolfram Alpha, there's Stable Diffusion, there's a whole host of different AIs that let you really tap into the creative side. And so I challenge a lot of my teacher candidates and students to essentially try to break the machine and create something new. Like, how do I leverage this? How do I, rather than saying, I have a 700-word essay that my teacher just gave me, and I want you to write it for me. Rather than doing that, say, all right, here's my argument. Little AI, what did I miss? Is there a significant point that I didn't even address? And it'll come back and it'll tell you, well, you missed like 5 really big points. You might want to address those. And you're like, oh, great. That's wonderful. The other things you can do with the little AI is you can identify how to make things more efficient. If you are stuck, for example, on how to respond to your boss's email, maybe it was a little terse, well, you can get some free words from the little AI, and it'll help craft your response. So having a conversation with the AI, having a back and forth, figuring out how to challenge your thinking as part of the AI experience is really exciting. So I challenge everyone to play with it, figure it out, but also with some cautions. Don't give out personal information. Don't tell it your social security number, for example. But you might want to say, yes, please donate to NCLD.
So Christine wasn't able to join us here today, but I know in that we work quite a bit with OET and a guidance document they've put out, and they're putting out further documents. There's the Office of Educational Technology at the U.S. Department of Education has put out a great blueprint for schools in the process of implementing AI in the classroom. If you've not had an opportunity to look at that, especially if you're an educator, educational leader, it's something to download and look at, because obviously AI offers a ton of benefit. I was showing some teachers the other day an AI application where there are already a library of books loaded into the app. And when the students go through it, it not only has the ability to do text-to-speech and read to the student, it's able to highlight the words. But here's the amazing part about what the AI does, because that's really all not that amazing. It's been around for a long time. But what the AI does is allows the student to interact with the book. It allows the student to ask questions of the book, about the book, right? Because the AI has learned the book. And so these are the amazing things that are just coming to the surface. And they're just coming to the surface, and we're at the very beginning of this innovation.
Yeah. I just want to add to that. I think another big, important, useful tool is that there's a lot of text that the AI tools can aggregate and present in visually for our students, in graphs and diagrams, and that really helps them to learn and process and manipulate the data in a different way.
So there are a lot of great benefits, but there's going to be some disruptions, and there are some concerns with AI. Let's talk about what some of those are. You want to?
Sure,
Go on,
sure.
Ericka?
I can start there. So, for us, when we started the school year last year and even again this fall, a big issue surrounding AI was academic integrity. The other main issue that we were grappling with was the idea that students' ability to write was being weakened by these tools. And I think, that's akin to when calculators came around. Kids won't be able to do math anymore, But I think a bigger challenge is over-reliance on these AI agents and teaching our students how to harness this tool. So specifically what I mean by that is AI tools, they make what we call hallucinations, where they invent information. The way that they work is by aggregating a lot of data and then predicting what possibly could come next. So you understand, like when you're texting, your phone predicts what's the next word you can say based on patterns. Well, similar, that's how data is sort of aggregated in these big tools. And so one thing I'm working on with my students is instead of relying on the AI to make your first draft, you want the AI to make your first draft, okay? But the student really needs to interrogate that first draft. They really need to learn how to retool the AI, retool the answers that it gives it, versus blindly adhering and taking it at face value. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges is teaching students and learners how to use this tool, the process of learning versus just saying, oh, here's the answer, here you go, let me submit it. So I think that's one of the big things. And then I think the other big thing is for all of us is to delegate tasks to the tool. So we are not really good at delegating which tasks the tools should be doing for us. So I think we need to pay closer attention to that. And I think for teachers, we should sort of really think about, hey, explaining to our students which of the assignment portions are suitable for AI and which are not.
So this has been a fun topic for the last 6 months because we've been inundated at the center and some other places regarding safety, regarding policy, regarding how the heck do we prevent parents from uploading all of the IEPs onto the AI and not removing any personally identified information. So there are certainly things that we have to be cognizant of. We want to make sure, like I said earlier, we protect our private data, our name, remove all that stuff. But the benefits are the personalized learning. So there are AIs out there that will help you write a better IEP that's more personalized because it's leveraging a lot of different data sources. Right now, some of the standard practices in schools is a drop-down menu of accommodations. Well, rather than having a drop-down menu, maybe we can have something a little bit more personal, which was the original intent. The other pieces that we've seen litigation occur are parents suing school districts to add the ChatGPT or other large language models as a support. And so it's interesting to see how those things will place in the next few months, years. In addition to that, there's been some great movement on some federal level policies. So the president just put out an executive order last Monday talking about AI and how it's going to impact the workforce, how it's going to impact society in general. I will mention though, disability was mentioned only twice, and it wasn't really instruction on how to support youth with disability. It was more of an access piece. So I would encourage you to continue to support and talk to your representatives and say, look, this is an important issue. We want to make sure our constituents are taken care of. And part of that is just making sure everyone's aware of those issues and being part of the conversation.
So there is a famous saying that if you've been around the field of special education for a while, the famous saying is, if you're not at the table, you're probably on the menu. So I think that's an important takeaway. No matter who you are in the room, whether you're a parent, whether you're an education leader, an educator, a civic leader, these are conversations we need to have. there's no question that AI is going to transform us as a society. It's going to transform who we are from a humanist sort of perspective, but we need to keep the humans in the center of that conversation, and that needs to happen through all of us. And that's the work that needs to take place, and the communication needs to keep going forward. I think the next panel, as we get up here, we're going to talk here in a few minutes about some of the great things that are going on in the industry level, and I think we're going to talk about similar conversations. What are some parting words? We've got about 3 minutes left. I'm getting cue cards.
I would love to hear from the audience. Does there a pressing question about AI and education that maybe we can toss out a response to?
You're stepping on Star's toes.
You're
Sorry,
stepping on
Star.
my toes.
Yeah.
It's the teacher in me. I'm sorry.
Uh-huh.
Do not bring down the bright star.
Hey, how are you guys? Thank you so much. I'm wondering, how can we direct administrators and teachers at schools, like my children's school? I want to go back to them and say, hey, is there a committee on this? Is there awareness? What has your policy been? My kids are in lower school, but they're going to move up. And like, what are they? I'm sure the high school kids all know about this, and there's some, how are they creating policy, or what resources can we give them?
So I can start, I guess.
Okay, go ahead.
So Trey and I and a couple of our colleagues from across the country, we have a federally funded center to provide technical assistance for faculty members in the use of innovative technologies. It's called CIDDL, CIDDL.org. And within that, we've talked very early on about this issue of supporting schools in making decisions. The issue that we had initially, in fact, New York City Public Schools was one of them. They banned AI altogether initially, and they've rolled that back now, and it's now fully integrated. The problem with banning AI, and so yes, have the proactive conversation about what needs to be discussed, but the issue that emerges is banning AI. Banning AI cannot be done unless we go back to paper and pencil. By going back to paper and pencil, we've made learning inaccessible for a host of students, especially those with learning disabilities. And so we need to really advocate that we have proper integration of this AI, and going to your school leadership and saying, what conversations are going on? How can I get a conversation going? Working with parent groups in the school. Those are critical things to start.
I will add that almost every administrator, leader, educator is out there, and there's a wide variance of knowledge about the little black box. And so part of it is educating folks, letting them understand, like, this is what it is. Demystify it. It's not, magic. It's math. And so once you figure that out, addressing policy, a lot of it is on the local education level. And so I sit on the board for my kids' school as well. And, I brought it up to the principal. I said, hey, I don't know if you've ever seen this, but 10 months ago, I said, this little thing is going to hit the market really soon, and it's going to change everything. And their first response was, oh, we're going to shut it down. And I'm like, well, that's not why I brought it up, but let's have a conversation a couple times. And over time, once they demystify what AI is, then it becomes less scary. And then they figure out, okay, what are the best practices? And I don't think we know yet, which is kind of the exciting part for me because I'm a nerd. But, we're figuring out, like, can we take these high leverage practices, evidence-based practice, and put them into this model and come out with something that's more personalized, more engaging, supporting executive function, et cetera. And so we're at that cusp of just learning what that looks like. But I think having the conversation.
We're at it.
Is there precedent? Is there something that came before this where schools had to come together and say, like, we need a committee on this because this is evolving. How do we deal with this?
Go ahead.
Well, I would say yes. I mean, we've had a lot of different policies come down the pipeline. I would say the news part, right? AI has been in the news for quite a bit of time, the last 6 months, and I think that's what's getting a lot of the attention, and that's partly why we're seeing a lot of scrambling going on right now. A lot of the historical efforts took time and effort to put boots on the ground and advocate and march on the Hill and demand change. We live in a digital age now, so it's a little different. And the interesting part, you were talking about the misinformation. Like, we have to be really good consumers of information and figure out how to disengage from misinformation and support proper information and vet information. And that's a skill set our kids and our future employees are going to so need desperately, because with 5 seconds of your voice, I can create a video and have you say whatever you want.
Dr. Ericka, I want to make sure you get in.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Very quickly, I would say, you know, when all of this came about for us at West Point, they came to my team and they say, hey, what is the guidance? And, you know, they wanted to revert back to oral assessments. And I was like, oh my goodness, we cannot do that. But I think, you know, you really need to be specific. I think people want these broad stroke policies. And when you get into it, at least in the learning environment, you want to understand, hey, what is your learning objectives? You know, what are things that the machine can do because they're better at doing it, yet what are the things we want our learners to be able to do, because only, you know, the creative pieces are the things that we really want our learners doing. We want them to solve problems critically, and AI is not good at that. So let's harness in, or let's get more specific on our curriculum, on our study guides, if you will.
You know, I appreciate your candor here, but as an African-American woman, I think it behooves me to ask, with the technological divide in marginalized communities and communities of color, how is AI going to be incorporated to make sure that these students aren't left behind? It's hard enough to educate students that are, quote, not differently abled. How is that going to impact on marginalized and communities of color?
If we're not proactive, it's going to continue to separate the divide, which is the scary part. Part of the research that we do at the Institute is to support traditionally marginalized populations. We're a minority-serving institution, and that's one of our mission statements. And it's really important to get those data. Right now, a lot of those data are missing. And so we have to figure out, how do we train these models, add to the database so that we represent all of the communities that we have and the constituents we want to serve.
And I also think it's imperative that you bring more people of color into the advocacy and the leadership of organizations like NCLD.
Absolutely.
Critically important.
I just wanted to add, you know, I'm working with my students a lot in this AI realm and DEI realm, and I specifically talk to them about design equity. And what I mean by that is that the design team needs to be representative. We should invite roboticists to talk with DEI experts when we're designing these systems. I would also say that researchers need to include societal implications of their work. We don't want to exacerbate old problems or create new inequities based on these algorithms.